Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet part 2 of the Market Day Cardigan, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. This pattern is being presented in 3 parts. Part 1 came out a week previously, this again is part 2, and part 3 will be released a week later. You can find all the tutorials when it's over on mooglyblog.com as well as on my YouTube channel. To make this pattern, I'm using Red Heart all-in-one granny square yarn, which is a wonderful yarn that creates 5 round 6-inch granny squares with only 2 ends. Of course, you can use whatever worsted weight yarn you like. Just make sure that a 5 round granny gives you a 6-inch square. Let's go ahead and get into part 2. So in part 1 of the Market Day Cardigan Crochet Along, we made the granny squares. These are 5 round granny squares. You can see here I'm using Red Heart all-in-one granny square yarn, which creates a 5-color granny square. And of course, it comes in lots of other colors. I happen to be using this Aran-Cream color. If you're using another type of yarn, perhaps Red Heart Super Saver, for example, if you want a solid granny square look, then just make sure that the squares you've made come to 6 inches. If you want to block them before beginning part 2 here, you absolutely can, but it's not required. For part 2, we're going to take the squares we've made and sew them together. It's going to form sort of a large T shape. After we've sewn them together, we put 1 round of edging around them and then set it aside for part 3. So now I'm going to demonstrate how to sew together the squares and how to add that edging. Okay, so here we're looking at the schematic for the smallest size. This fits size extra small, small, and medium. Each of the squares that you see here represents one of the motifs or one of the granny squares that we've made. They're simply sewn together in this shape. Here you can see with the smallest size, we have so many across the top and so many across the bottom with a total of 4 rows. Again, you can reference the written pattern for your size to see exactly how your schematic is laid out. Here next, we see the schematic that fits size large, extra large, and 2X. You can see this schematic has slightly more squares. Also, take note of where those colored circles are. And here is the schematic for the largest size, which fits sizes 3X, 4X, and 5X. Again, we've added 4 more squares around the edges, but those colored dots are in the same spot, and those dots will come in handy a little bit later. So sewing our squares together is something that I prefer to do with a cut length of yarn and a sewing needle. If you would prefer to do a crocheted seam, you can do that, but just make sure it's a tight seam, not one of the loose, lacier seams. We want our squares right up together, otherwise it will greatly affect how our sweater wears and basically what size it ends up being. So the sewn seam that I like to use for this is the mattress stitch. It's a really beautifully, nearly invisible seam, and since I'm using more yarn from the same skein, there's going to be sections that don't match that cream color. If you are someone to whom having those seams disappear completely is really important, then you can absolutely go out and buy some matching Red Heart Super Saver in sort of a cream colorway. I'm not sure it'll be that name. You'll have to kind of hold it up, or honestly, whatever color you're using. If you're edging it in white, use white. If you're edging it in black, use black. Whatever color you'd like, you can buy a solid to sew those together. But I find with the mattress stitch, it hides the seaming well enough that I don't worry about it. So let's go ahead and begin. We're going to start by taking any 2 of our squares because we need to just start sewing somewhere. So we find one corner and we're going to pick one of them to start on. Whichever one, doesn't really matter. And we know that in each of our corners, I'm just going to pull this up right here, we have 3 chains. So we want to find that last chain in the corner and come from behind with our yarn needle. We're just going to go under those top 2 loops. A little harder when you come to the chain. There we go. So I'm just going to pull that through. And I don't want to pull it all the way through, of course, because then we won't be sewing. So just make sure you leave a few inches there hanging as a tail. Then we come over to our other square. You can see I'm leaving this all kind of loose right now while I get myself set up. Then I'm going to come to this square. And since I'm going to be seaming up this side, I'm going to find the first chain on this corner. There we are. But I'm still going to come from behind and pull through. I want to make sure not to get myself all tangled up, so you need to pay attention a little bit to your yarn lengths here, just like anytime you're doing some hand sewing. And then we gently pull until we can get those sort of close together here. There we go. So basically now we're going to go back and forth. We're going to go to the next stitch on this side from behind, then the next stitch on this side from behind, back and forth, sort of zipping it up as we go up this set of stitches here. So we come back to our first one and we find that very first stitch here along this side, come from behind with our yarn needle and go ahead and pull through. Then come over to this side, find the next stitch here along this side, and pull through from behind. Like so. Now, you can see this is a little loose right here, but as I go, every few stitches, I'm going to go ahead and pull that tight. Now, I need to hold on to that end so I don't accidentally pull it through when I'm doing these first couple, but this will pull together really, really tightly and beautifully, and we'll get our squares right next to each other. We're going one stitch by one stitch, so they should line up perfectly. When, for instance, I've got a center double crochet here as my next stitch on this side, I'll pull that through, make sure it doesn't get tangled around my other square. Then when I come to the other side, I should have another center double crochet of a cluster. So if you'd like, you can use your stitch markers to sort of match those stitches up to help keep you on track. But for a project like this, where we're doing 2 granny squares and we know they should have the same exact number of stitches along the side, then we don't have to necessarily use our stitch markers to meet those up, as long as we pay attention. For here, for instance, here, I've got that last one of this cluster of 3. I'll come from behind with this one. So I know when I go to this side, it should be the last one of that cluster of 3. There we are. So I pull that all the way through, and we just keep working our way right up those sides with our stitches. Like I say, every few inches, just give that a tight pull, and you can really see, even though I'm working in a different color, how very much that sewn seam disappears. So we just keep working our way up to this next corner, and then if you've got more yarn left, you can add another square. Here's another one I made in another color when I was practicing with this yarn. Let's say I came up to this side. I sewed into this one last, so I'd probably add the next one right here and just keep doing that mattress stitch right along the side. Just keep going. Just keep an eye on your schematic to make sure that you sew all your squares together in the right shape. When you run out of yarn, cut a new length and start sewing again. Here on my finished sweater, you can see how those mattress stitched seams turn out. You can see there's just a little bit of color peek through, but really it sort of blends into the overall color of the sweater and really adds to this sort of really neutral look that I really like with this yarn color. Again, if you want to make sure to have a completely clean look, you can go out and buy a solid color of yarn that matches the last round of your squares and use that to do your sewing. After you've got them all sewn together, as shown in the schematic for your size, again, make sure you count how many are across the top 2 rows and how many are across the bottom 2 rows for your size, and you've sewn all your squares together, then it's time to add 1 round of edging around that T shape. Now let's take a quick look at our schematic again. This one happens to be for the smallest size, but right now we're just concentrating on those colored circles. You see 2 red circles to the bottom left and 2 blue circles to the bottom right. If you use a stitch marker to connect the 2 red circles together and the 2 blue circles together, you'll be able to try on your Market Day cardigan at this point. Now, remember, there's going to be a shawl collar added as well as a hem that will add some length and a little bit more to the front. So this is where you can decide, do I need to take off some of those squares and move down to the smaller schematic, or do I need to add 4 more squares and move up to the next size available in this pattern? This is a personal choice, and it really just depends on how you like the fit of your sweater. So after you've tried it on and decided if that's enough squares or if you need to add some more or maybe take a couple off, then you can take those stitch markers right back out and we'll go ahead and add our edging. Now, before we make our edging, we need to refer to that schematic one more time. Again, this is just for the colored dots, so it doesn't really matter as much which one you're looking at. This happens to be the smallest one. If you are right-handed, then you are going to want to join your yarn to the green dot. If you are left-handed, then you are going to want to join your yarn to the purple dot. This just gets us working in the right direction around our T-shape sweater, essentially. so that we can be all set up to make our shawl collar next. So now we're going to go back to our skein of yarn, not a cut piece, just the piece coming out of our skein, and add our edging. We're going to join with a slip stitch to that corner that is marked in the schematic, depending on whether you're right-handed or left-handed. Then we're going to begin edging across our piece. You can see here are the two that I just started sewing together. Of course, my finished sweater is all sewn together. So after we've joined that corner, we chain one, single crochet in that same chain space. There we go. And then we are going to work our way across the square. The way that I have to write this out for standard crochet instructions makes it kind of long, but it's pretty simple. We work a single crochet in each double crochet. So let me get that going here. Of course, my hook wanted to get caught. Let's try that again. There we go. 1, 2, 3, because we've got 3 double crochets there in that little section. Then when we come to a chain 1 space, we simply single crochet in the chain 1 space. Pull up a little bit more yarn here, get that straightened out. Single crochet in each of these double crochets. 1, 2, 3. Then single crochet in the next chain 1 space. And we do that all the way across each square. Then we just have to treat these corners here when we get to where those meet a little bit differently. So I'm just working my way across here in single crochet, nice and evenly. Single crochet again in each double crochet and single crochet in each chain 1 space. You don't have to work into the specific chain 1. You can go right into that space just like we did when we did the double crochets for our granny squares. You can see here I've come to that last set of double crochets for this particular square. So I'll single crochet in each of those. My goodness, my fingers did not want to cooperate there for a second. There we go. All right, so now this is where things get a little different. We've got the space where those 2 squares were sewn together. So we've got a chain 3 space right here and a chain 3 space right here. And those 2 actual chains should be sewn together. So I'm going to just tighten that up a little bit because, of course, I haven't woven any of my ends in yet. I like to do that with sweaters at the end just in case I need to go back and change something. So we've worked our way across all those sets of 3 double crochets and all those chain 1 spaces. We come to this first corner right here. We're simply going to go right back in that and single crochet. Then we're going to skip over that sewn seam. Don't try and crochet into it. Come to that next chain space here at the corner and put 2 single crochets into this one. 1 and 2. And this will give you sort of the extra stitch that makes up for that seam right there, so you don't end up pulling together. Then it's just the same thing. Single crochet in each double crochet, single crochet in each chain 1 space. Next time you get to where 2 squares are sewn together, put 1 single crochet in that first chain space, put 2 in the next, and just begin again. So I'm going to go ahead and finish crocheting across the top of this square, and then when I get to the end, we'll treat this as if it was the corner at the top of your T on your schematic. So now let's say we've worked all the way across the top of our T shape for our sweater here, and now we are at that opposite top corner. When we get to that chain space, we're simply going to work in there for a single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet right back in that corner. That, of course, turns us this way, and now we can crochet down the sides of those 2 squares for the top of your sweater. When you reach that opposite corner, we just treat it like this one again. We're working across the top of the T. We go down the side. That brings us down to another corner. So we treat that just like we did this one. And then when we come in sort of on our shape, let me lay out some squares here to visualize that a little better here. There we go. So let's say we're in a close-up here at the top of our sweater, right? We go down the side of the top. We go across the bottom and right down here. As we come this way, these squares are sewn together and we can treat those just the same way we treated these right here. We don't have to do anything special when we have 2 squares meet like this. So if I turn it this way, I'll get that straightened out a little bit here so it makes a little more sense. When we work down this side, when we get to this corner, we single crochet once in there, then we just hop right over here, 2 single crochets in this corner, and continue on down. When we get to the bottom of our sweater, of course, when you do the single crochet, chain 2, single crochet there. Then we can continue right on across. So essentially, you're going to work like that all the way around the piece. When you get back up to that first corner, what you want to do is, after we work up that last side here at the top, we are going to, of course, single crochet in each of those double crochets. When we get to that corner, we've already got a single crochet right there. Remember, that's where we started. So we'll work a single crochet into that space. And then instead of chaining 2 and joining with a slip stitch, instead we chain 1 and work a half double crochet right into the top of that first single crochet. Let me kind of pull the yarn over here and show you what that looks like. We can fake it a little bit here on this corner. So I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch right in here. Let me pull that one up here. So we'll say we've worked all the way around our T shape here. Now I've come to that very last corner. Get that out of the way there so it's a little easier to see. See, that's the corner we joined to. So I put a single crochet right in there. And then I chain 1 and I half double crochet in the top of that first single crochet right there. This is really handy because, as you can see, my hook is now in the center of that corner space. So we're all set up to begin our shawl collar, which is going to begin part 3. But wait, there's one more thing I almost forgot to mention. We need to put 2 stitch markers on our piece before we're completely done with part 2 and all set up for part 3. So here I've laid out my 3 sample squares sort of in that T shape. And here is that top longest line right across the very top of your T. Now let's go back to the schematic for a minute and take a look at those top 2 dots. There's a purple dot and a green dot. And those are going to give us our points to start counting from, depending on if we're right or left-handed, to place our stitch markers. So here is how it works. Looking at those 2 dots, starting right there and counting in on those single crochets, if you are right-handed, you will place your first stitch marker in stitch number 44, counting from the green dot along the top longest edge. Then you'll put your second stitch marker in stitch number 69, counting from the left purple dot along that same top edge. The reason we count in from those top edges like that is because there will be different number of stitches in between depending on the size you've made. Now, if you are left-handed, it's the opposite. You'll place your first stitch marker in stitch number 44, counting from the left corner, which is the purple dot, along, again, that top longest edge. Your second stitch marker will be in stitch number 69, counting from the right or green dot along that top edge. So if that was a little confusing, again, that's all written out in the written instructions. You just count in from each of those dots, place your stitch markers, and now you'll finally be all set up for part 3. If you'd like to go ahead and block the sweater so far while it's in this flat T shape, you absolutely can do that, but you don't have to. There will be one more opportunity to block it flat before we add our final bit in part 3. And that's how to assemble and edge the squares for part 2 of the Market Day Cardigan Crochet Along on mooglyblog.com. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.